My name is Preston, and I'm the individual kind of chairing our initiative on eco-sustainability at our chapter. And it's my pleasure to introduce Denise Victoria Staff, who is an individual that is quite expert on circularity, or the circularity required for us eventually to meet the goal of having a clean planet again. And I approached her first to talk about things such as the ESG and other matters. And she said, well, that's interesting, but I have something that you might find very appealing, and people misunderstand what it all really means. And I have a presentation on how to start your circularity journey now on a strategic basis. And it's workable with standard tools available. And it's not rocket science if you know how to creatively put them together in the right sequence. And I became enamored with all that. It said, this is great stuff. And I really said, yeah, we got to go do this, because we've had two strategic things. This would be the second one, and everything else has been somewhat tactical, like the GHG protocol. So I was very excited about that. And I actually got excited about the background. Denise has 3 degrees. The last one was on had a master in environmental management sustainability from Harvard, but she also has 20 years of experience. So she apparently has been going back and forth between the academic and the practical. Yes. And she stands out there. And I liked in her bio, the last paragraph, which I thought was really sums up the way she thinks as an individual, which is, I know she knows how to connect the dots. It's very difficult to connect the dots. Most people can't do that. And it's helpful when someone comes around that allows you to see what happens when you connect the dots. But this is the last paragraph. Through her work at the Center for Corporate Performance and Sustainability, her primary focus is on the systematic development of sustainability process approach to get organizational results through a transparent, collaborative, and in-depth look at their inputs, outputs, focusing on waste management and circularity. And what that means for me is that she has a system. This is systematic approach. This isn't at random, let's go fight a fire, one fire at a time, which I think is going to happen for many companies unless we get to them first, because people have been a bit of a laggard in taking on sustainability. So this is any part of it is the process approach taught at the Center for Corporate Performance and Sustainability is based on decades of proven results to have organizations reach their zero waste and circularity goals. And again, what really impressed me when we had a conversation way back when was she's talking about the here and now, not the future. She's talking about tools that work, that can be mastered, not esoteric thinking. So I'm looking forward to your presentation. Denise, please proceed.
Thank you so much for such a nice beginning. So I'm going to touch on this later in the presentation, but I'm going to mention it now as well. Everything that I'm talking about is not new. It may have a different spin. It may be put together a little differently, but most of the tools that you are going to see have been around for a long time. And you may say, oh, I know what that is, or, I never even knew that existed. But so it's never because I think it's a good idea. And I always tell my clients that we're never going to do anything because I think it's a good idea. We're going to do because it's backed in science. And there is a lot of people that think it's a good idea. So with that being started, we're going to start talking about circular economy. And, what is a strategy? A strategy is a plan of action to overcome a major roadblock, right? So we're setting up a plan of action and we're designing it so that we can overcome it. Now, when we're looking at circular economy, the basic definitions of circular economy are minimizing material and use and putting things back into use and not using raw materials that you don't need or anything virgin that you don't need. But we're also going to talk about life cycle thinking. And if you're not familiar with life cycle thinking is the beginning approach as you're looking at doing a life cycle analysis. So a lot of people have heard of LCA, but this is how we're going to look at the 10,000 foot view above and see our whole supply chain. it's a beginning of an exercise. So those are some three big terms that we're going to talk about. And why do we want to even do this, right? So we want to get away from that linear consumption model because customers have a bigger desire for sustainable products. And as businesses follow that same curve up, you're going to find your competitive advantage in your market space against your competitors, against products that you don't even know that are your competitors. I don't know if anybody is a big fan of the former Harvard professor, where he talks about what is your competitors. So the competitor of margarine might be jelly and butter and peanut butter and lots of things, because your competitors sometimes aren't always, it's the job that you've hired them to do. So if you're putting on pants, there's lots of different types of things that you could wear. So therefore, there's that job that you can be doing. So with this, we're going to talk about using it to create a competitive advantage, not only against your competitors, but in the job that your product does. So here's a couple of views, nothing new here. But 59% of consumers are being influenced by the impact of the products that they buy. 61% would be less likely to buy a company's products if they discovered that they were not on that sustainability path. And so when you add that all up, it's saying that, like it or not, if you listen to your stakeholders, this is what they want. So we need a plan of action. How are we not only going to accomplish it, but how are we going to communicate it? Because communicating is where we get ourselves in trouble, right? And we don't want to greenwash. So we're going to talk about circular economy and circularity. Now, why am I not just talking about plain old sustainability? Because when you drive towards circular economy, you are reducing risk in your supply chain and your organization. You are increasing your bottom line profits, and there's an opportunity for the brand and not damage to the brand. Because when you're driving towards circularity, you have to make some quantitative changes, okay? And they're going to affect all three of those. Okay, so what does circular economy look like for supply chains? Sustainable supply chains and green supply chains mean that you're focused on your sourcing more environmentally responsible materials. You want to do less harm, okay? So there's that social component that you also want to focus on better demand planning, so less materials are being processed on goods that no one wants, right? So demand planning is also, it's kind of outside the scope of this, but it's a huge part of circular economy. And then adding the circular approach means that doing the steps to make your supply chain sustainable with the extra focus on the whole product from cradle to grave. And you're going to close the loops and you're going to eliminate waste and pollution. And we're going to talk about how. So this is for you if you have no idea where to start, whether you have some sustainable initiatives, but they haven't gotten off the ground, where you have a few goals and targets, where you understand what the stakeholder is wanting, but you're waiting to see what everyone else does, or you got in buy-in from your management team and you made a green team. That's a bad thing. And we'll talk about why. So the number one tool we're going to talk about first, and we're going to do this as tools. And you can take them or leave them, use what works for you and leave the ones that maybe you might already have a system in place. The key for these tools is that they are something that you can insert into what you already do. Okay, so they're plug and play, so to speak. Remember USB first came out, things were plug and play, and that was so different. I just told everyone how old I was. So when you're looking at life cycle thinking, as we talked about in the description, we are looking at the 10,000 foot above. So we want to look at the extraction of the raw materials. We want to look at the manufacturing. Then we want to look at distribution. How does it get to the customer? Are there, and we've got some other examples here and some end of life scenarios. And then what you'll notice is at end of life, there's reuse, there's remanufacturing, there's post-consumer recycling, and that's your reverse logistics. So logistics plays a key part in that, in the circular economy. We're not really going to talk about it much in this presentation, but I would say a focus should also be on logistics, because when you've got that added transportation that is now coming back, you are going to be adding on to your footprint. Okay. So before you ever redesign anything, before you ever do anything, these tools are first. Okay. So let me stop there and say recycling is not the answer. Never the answer. You want to redesign, you want to reduce, you want to reuse, you want to recover, and then you want to recycle. And if you look, it's one step above landfilling. Now, why? Why is it one step above landfilling? Well, because it now has to be transported to a facility. It has to be sorted. It has to be sent now to a place that can process it. There's energy, water, whatever, and processing it. So yes, you don't have raw materials, but what you do have is you have a whole lot of footprint in there that you wouldn't need if you were eliminating it in the first place. So elimination is 100 times better than control. So everything that you want to do, you want to eliminate versus control. So the first thing you want to do is you want to draw this out. I have a design degree, and all the architecture classes that I took, we had to draw things out. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is draw it out. And what this is going to help you do is this is going to help you understand your inputs. Now, inputs are opportunities for your sustainable supply chain practices. Your outputs are opportunities for your circularity principles. Okay, so keep that in mind, and let's look at drawing. So now what we have here is, let's say, a carpet tile. And I come from the building material industry heavily, so these are things that I know off the top of my head. So we're doing something this simple, but imagine any of your products that you're working with. And on the very far left, what I have outside of this, where it says raw material input, you can see here in the middle, that's going to be kind of an extraction. So let's say, for instance, extraction of materials in packaging. If it was cardboard, it would be the cutting of the trees. Okay, so we're going to go left to right, and we are going to draw out each one of our materials in a product. Now, if you have a product family, you can do it for a whole family and just kind of put some estimates. If you've got, hundreds of SKUs and you want to just do a family, that's fine too. But I just did something simple. So we've got limestone, and limestone has energy and water as an input. So when you quarry it, you use water to wash it, and you use energy to break it up. And then as an output, you have waste, you have emissions, and you have wastewater. Okay, now you may not know all of these. You can maybe just put some of your inputs, and you'll know your inputs better when you get into manufacturing. But these are just kind of guess. And you'll see why when we start looking at what we can do. Then there's polypropylene yarn would be in a carpet. And so the same thing, we've got energy, but notice here we've got packaging, because the propylene yarn will have come from someplace else in a package. Okay. And then we have waste, emissions, and packaging as an output. Then we've got packaging. Packaging is an input. What you're going to realize when you do this, and I hope you realize, is there's a whole lot of packaging running around, packaging that you don't even think of every day. And when we're thinking about this, I also want to make this note. I know that a lot of circularity concentrates on retailer forward buying behavior, what the retailer is doing. We're going to look at what you have operational control over, or operational influence. So if you're buying something, you have influence on it. If you're the manufacturer, you may not have as much influence over the retailer, and you definitely don't have as much influence over the customer, right? So we're going to use the saying, manage your own house first before you start going and your neighbors and trying to manage their house. So everything that we're going to talk about is meant for you to make your organization as circular as possible. And believe it or not, you're going to attract the customers. Patagonia attracts customers based on its philosophies, right? And based on the way it does business. It doesn't tell its customers that you have to do this. It says that this is what we believe, right? So you're gonna start here with your raw materials, and you're gonna draw it out, and you're gonna guess on your inputs and outputs. You don't have to be exact at this point, but what it's gonna teach you is that high level pattern. We're looking for patterns. And then how does it come to you? Truck, rail, truck, boat, truck, okay? And those all have emissions, which are really important. Now it gets into your manufacturing facility, and you've got your inputs and outputs of making your product. And then it goes to distributors, and they've got inputs and outputs. And there may be a second level for wholesalers, and then retailers, and then customers. But again, we're going to start kind of where you can control. Now, greening your supply chain, remember, is changing and affecting your input. So are you buying raw materials? Now that you're looking at this and you're looking at what you got every day, are you buying your raw materials from the most sustainable suppliers? Do your suppliers employ child labor? And start asking those questions. I mean, that's kind of in sustainable procurement, but you're going to start asking those questions. Can you buy it from a domestic source? Before everyone came on, we were just talking about mitigating risk and resiliency. And I think a lot of companies have learned a little bit about me buying things a little bit more domestically. Can we buy multiple items from the same supplier and ship them together? And these are all things that you think about every day. They're not new, but these are going to be your supply chain, your sustainable supply chain questions that you're just going to kind of go through. Maybe sometimes, it goes on the back burner and you're not thinking about it, but these are the things that you're going to start asking when you're looking at your inputs, okay? Now we want to look at it and say, okay, where are our patterns? Now that we've drawn this out, what does it look like from that high level view? And I'm using a very simple example, which is packaging, but I think that in so many places, your warehouse becomes the dumping ground for all the packaging from, all of your suppliers. And a lot of it maybe is unnecessary. So here we're just highlighting packaging. And if you change one of your packaging at the level of the supplier, everything is connected. So when you're looking at processes, I gave you a first rule. Elimination is better than control. My second rule is everything is connected to everything else. So if I were to eliminate, I work with my supplier and I can eliminate packaging at this limestone because they're not putting it in reusable bins, let's say, or, I could eliminate the packaging at the propylene yarn because they're over packaging it. And we're going to talk about that. Then guess what? I don't have to deal with it when I get over to the manufacturing and I'm now looking at my, 40-yard container of waste being emptied every 3 days. So what it's doing is it's allowing me to say, okay, this is connected to where? And then I can look back and say, okay, it's connected to my supply chain and they have an output of waste and I have their output of waste, or I'm sorry, they have an input of waste and I have their output. So now I am saying, okay, these are connected. So if I want to make a decision about how this is going to not show up in my 40-yard container, I need to go work with that supplier and find out how. And we're going to look at that more closely. But here we're just looking for patterns. We're looking for everything up here. Same thing on the distributor end. Their output of packaging is your input. Okay, so they're all connected. So this is where we start asking questions like, how do you change the product packaging? Because if you're eliminating raw material inputs anywhere, you're eliminating the ability for it to be an output, okay? Are we utilizing the best routes and technologies? Because we're drawing it out, remember? So we can start asking a lot of questions about that. Is my supplier's packaging optimized? And another output sometimes is hazardous waste. And that's a big one because hazardous inputs to your product make it very difficult to recycle, reuse, remanufacture. So we also want to eliminate hazardous inputs to the products whenever possible, because that creates not only an output of hazardous waste, but it also creates further complications down the line. Do you want me to stop for questions? Does anybody have a question, or do you want me to keep going?
I think everybody's intensely listening to what you have to say. And
Okay.
looking. Yeah.
Okay. I'm not okay. I just want to make sure that somebody's not like, I don't understand. Okay. Some of it is very basic sustainable supply chain practices. So now we're going to say we've drawn it out. We've noticed patterns. Let me go back here. We've noticed patterns. We've got some ideas. We've asked some questions. And now we're going to say, okay, I think I know what I want to focus on, right? So if you change the input, you don't have to deal with the output, or the output is lessened. And so I want to, now where do I want to do? I want no more than 3 to 4 initiatives at a time. That's the rule. You can't have more than 3 to 4. We're going to create job-specific KPIs with tool 2. We're going to find them. And then we're going to track our progress over multi-quarters and years, because net zero waste, circularity, all of this is obviously not done in a short amount of time. So now we're going to look at tool 2. And so tool 1 has us up here. We're looking down and we're saying we get it from here, it goes here, then it goes in the factory. This is what happens here, and then it goes there. Now we're in the factory, or we're in the warehouse. And what we're saying is, okay, now I want to map out step by step what happens to things once they come in, okay? Because remember, we can only change things when we're looking at the job level, okay? Because those are the people that are doing the change. If I say, okay, everybody, we're going to be circular and we're going to eliminate waste, that affects no one. Maybe a few people will be like, oh yeah, we got to do this. So let's take the nylon yarn, for instance. So it's going to come in on a boat. Well, it's going to come from a truck, but it came on a boat. And we're going to receive it. And so the top level is the, this is level 1, and this is the receiving, and then it gets into storage, and then it's going to go to the line where they're going to, use it. So this is the very, very high level. The next level is the work step. This is level 2. And level 3 is your opportunities. These are your outputs. This is where you're going to find circularity. Okay. And so in this case, this is called process mapping. You can look it up, or I think I have my email on the last slide. You guys, I'll give you my email. I can send you papers. One of my mentors, Dr. Pajasic at Harvard, has tons of resources on process mapping that I can give to you, some journal articles and stuff. So now we're looking at the work level. So we're receiving it as the overarching level. And now we're literally walking the line and following it, or walking the warehouse. And we're going to say, okay, it's going to be unloaded. And then we're going to move the cartons to storage. And then we're going to remove excess packaging. And this is how it's going to happen. And then when we remove the excess packaging, we've got metal straps that go to recycle. We've got filler that goes to waste. And we've got plastic wrap. It should say something besides and recycle. I don't know why that says that, but to recycle. And so now we know what's happening. So when you draw this out, when you walk the floor and you look at the things that are happening step by step by step, what do I just now know? I know the person is in charge of unloading the container is my person who's in charge of packaging. I need to go talk to him or her. because they know the most about what kind of packaging is happening, where is it going, do we have the right bins, are they in the right place, are things getting put in the wrong place, and what can we do to improve it? Okay, so they're a huge source of knowledge, but their job is also very specific because now I can create KPIs around what they do and they can own it. Remember when I said a green team was bad? A green team is bad because it's the select few that get picked or select themselves. In my green team, it's everybody who is in a work step that affects our goals is in my green team. Okay, so I'm looking for those opportunities. And this could be a hazardous waste that could be spilled. What is our mitigation strategies to make sure that it's not spilled? It could be a multitude of things. We're just using a very easily thing of packaging. So now we kind of, sorry. I kind of have the steps for where it is, okay? So now what do we do? So we collaborate. As I said, the first person I'm going to talk to is the person who's unloading that container and knows about that waste. How often does it come in? What do you do with it? Do all shifts, if there's multiple shifts, are we all doing the same thing? We're asking questions. Do we have the right bins? Is it easy for you to get to there? Or is there sometimes paper on the floor that is a health and safety hazard, right? So we're always looking for that improvement. And so we're going to collaborate. But then that person could tell me, they put 20 wraps of this plastic wrap on here. In reality, we could probably use 10. And we say, great, let's have the manufacturer try it once and see what happens, right? Or let's collaborate with the manufacturer because now that's 50% less waste that would go to waste. And then, how does the rest of the packaging look? And you talk to the shift managers and, all of those people. And then you're able to create not only your target, right? So we want to reduce our waste by 50% by 2023. Okay. Now, just so you know, your goal should be 50%, and then it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. I saw someone's goal the other day. They were saying they are 20% to their goal after 3 years. And like next year, they're going to have 50%. And then they're going to have 40% and 10%. Doesn't work that way. The low hanging fruit will give you the first 50, and then it gets harder and smaller and smaller and harder and smaller and harder as you keep going. So we're going to talk about the maturity matrix because that's going to help you track your time. All right. So maturity matrix is actually in the appendix of ISO 9004. I did, as I said, these tools, the first tool, life cycle analysis, that's been around for, the 70s. The second tool, process mapping, the EPA has been using that for pollution prevention since at least the 80s, if not earlier, very successfully. And now we're going to talk about a quality check that has also been around for a long time. If you don't like ISO, it's okay. We're not really going to use ISO. We're just going to use their format because it really works. Okay. So in a maturity matrix, what they have is typically 5 levels. So you've got level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, then level 5. In each level, you have action items that you either comply or you don't. So for instance, and always the as is, as you are right now is level 1. You are level 1. And then you need steps to get to level 2. So if we're going to get to 50% waste reduction by 2023, end of 2023, let's say, we now need to say, okay, what is the first thing we need to do? We need to have resources defined. We need to know what our resources are. What do we need to get there? Well, we need KPIs. Maybe we need more bins. Maybe we need some education. We need some resources. So right now we're level 1, which is what's going on in our organization. Level 2 is we've defined some resources. We've, considered risks and, made opportunities and set KPIs. Now, these you make yourself. And I have another course I'll give you at the end to give you an example of where we talk about exactly what to put in these. But 1 is always the current state, 5 is the goal. Okay. And the goal keeps moving, by the way. So 50% is your goal. Then in 2024, an additional 20% is your goal. So 5 changes again. So you're always sliding it up as you get closer and closer. Just imagine your target is here and you have your 5 things. And as you keep accomplishing, the ruler just keeps sliding up. Okay. Now, why does this work? Well, everybody knows you're at level 1 right now, and it's very easy. There's 3 steps, 5 steps, 4 steps that you need to do to get to level 2. And so everyone's level 1 right now, but everybody also is going to know what you need to do to get to level 2. And so it becomes very easy. We've got these KPIs and we need conformance to these KPIs 50% of the time by the end of 2022 and across all 3 shifts if we've got more than 1 shift. And you just keep sliding it up and sliding it up and sliding it up. And you keep changing the rules as you're doing it so that once you get to level 4, you get to bump back down to level 1. And you just keep striving and striving and striving. So the first thing you do is in tool 1, you take a layout and look for patterns and things that you think you want to look at. Level 2, you zoom in with your process mapping where you're walking and physically seeing where the waste is, or, if it's greenhouse gases, walk your floors and see how much propane is being used. Look at your distances on your transportation, look at where you are using things. So it doesn't just have to be waste. It could be a lot of other things or water. And then your 3, you're making your KPIs based on what you found. And then 4 is you're creating this maturity matrix to define your process to get there. Okay. And like I said, it's ISO 9004. It's actually in the appendix. They have a bunch of them. Usually I just take one that I like and kind of change it up and make it a little bit more relevant, but I use a lot of their original methodology. So when you're looking at circularity, obviously we used a very simple example of packaging, but you're going to want to consider lots of things, no more than 3 to 4 a year at a time. You have to accomplish 3 to 4. After that, you'll get spread too thin. And you could pick any of these kinds of flows. You could pick a material flow where you are hazardous materials, virgin raw materials. This also improves your relationship with your suppliers, because why should they buy extra packaging that you are throwing away? Packaging is necessary, I know, but at the same time, when I do someone's life cycle, I'm super frustrated by packaging because it's literally just going to be mostly landfilled. And then you can look at water, you can look at energy, your greenhouse gas emissions. Preston was telling me you guys had a great session on greenhouse gas measuring. That's another part of circularity, becoming carbon neutral. Byproducts, you can always look at more life cycle type studies. You can really zero in on your footprint a little bit better with not just thinking, but the actual process. So it's way more than packaging. We talked about packaging, but you're going to look for these kinds of patterns in your analyses. And then you can add on, right? So because these are tools and they are essentially plug and play, you pick what works for you. You can always be adding on. I kind of think of these tools a little bit like Legos. Like they fit into what you have. They may be a different color or different size than what you're doing. You can build on them and you can keep adding. So there are a bunch of resources on the Sustainable Development Goals, and being able to incorporate those into what you're doing, where, you can do, what do you call it? Sustainable consumption, climate action, clean water and sanitation is a big one, especially in developing countries where you might have your output might be wastewater, even in the US. Output, I mean, how much do we see lately about water? and, not good water. And so this is a great add-on on top of what you're already doing. And then because you're doing these in small chunks that are very systematic, they're very easy to add on. Sorry, I have like all my lights on and my eyes are too much light. Okay. And then, okay, so now let's talk about the sustainable, it's just creating value from your sustainable actions. So remember, we have an action plan, and our action plan is to work towards, your target. But at the same time, businesses are in business to make money. So we need to create value. And I think that is the number one thing that needs to come out of this. Yes, save the environment. Yes, to all of this, but we need to learn to create value. And so, as I said, this is a proven tool. So these tools all are nothing new. You can find lots of data on all of them. Your projects, remember I said no more than 3 to 4 a year. Your project should be break even in the beginning. Okay. So the money that you're saving from packaging, the money that you're saving from no longer having to pay as much electricity, the savings from the dumpsters that you don't need to dump all the time, all of that should pay for whatever, if you need to add anything to it. Do you need to add more bins so that things are recycled in the right place? So remember I said a cross-functional team. Always have someone who can do the math on your team, so that when you're presenting this, you're not saying, you know what, we need to be sustainable for being sustainable. What if we could do projects that in the first year they're break even, and then every year after that you're still saving on energy, you're still saving on water, you're still saving on packaging that you no longer buy, you're still saving on dumpsters that you're no longer dumping. So you have that savings that goes on and on. When you do this, everyone in the organization learns the systems thinking, and they're also involved in the process because you're walking the floor, you're asking questions, you're talking to procurement. Everybody starts getting involved, and that's going to help you even more design out waste and excess everything, because people that do it every day understand it. And then you'll be able to have measurable results with your stakeholders. So the thing that I think is crazy is when companies say, oh yeah, we're going to be net zero waste by 2040. Mic drop. That's it. That's all they got. There's nothing else there. But why not be communicating your quantifiable results? That's why in the beginning I said circularity will help you not greenwash, because circularity is going to give you numbers, and those numbers look great in charts on your website, and those numbers are great to tell shareholders. And that is what keeps you from greenwashing, because you've got numbers and you've got the science to back it up, math, in fact. So that was why I said, don't just go for sustainability, go to circular and make sure that that's part of your action plan. So that's everything. I don't even know how much time I have. I forgot to ask. So I hope I didn't go over. Are there any questions?
No, you have more time. You could actually consume maybe 20 more minutes, and we would.
Oh my goodness. I didn't plan on that much more time.
Okay.
I thought you were going to make me say 45 minutes.
Well,
So
no.
I will answer any questions. I know I get really involved in.
Denise, did you say brainwash or greenwash?
Exactly.
Well, which is your term?
Greenwash.
Green?
Yeah, greenwash.
Jim, what I mean by greenwash is companies find very innovative ways of lying. They do a lot of them, like Patagonia. Patagonia actually has a terrible score because they outsourced production to third world, but they don't talk about that. Everything else about them is great. Most of the companies that are into IT services, they're running data banks and stuff, have computers, all networked together. They have a horrible, they're polluters. But so what they do is they forget their suppliers, scope 3 in the GHG protocol. They leave them out of the picture. And so they're greenwashers. But there's a new approach taking place, which is it's called collusion monitor, where 50 very science-oriented people have gotten together, and they can tell you what every power plant, with every dump, what every factory over time is polluting. And the first pass of doing it is they have satellites that they're using that have been volunteered, that have different camera types. They can measure different things. I think they identified 20 more power plants that exist in the world that were not previously known to exist. So greenwashing is it's a really dirty word, and a lot of companies are going to be embarrassed soon.
Yeah, and I think that what happens is marketing has no clue and they don't talk to anybody that's doing anything. And so they ask somebody, hey, what are we doing? We recycle our office paper. Okay, great. That's a great story. So I think that greenwashing sometimes is a little unintended, but a lot of times they don't have anything to report. So they're grasping, right? They're like anything that they could say that would remotely sound good, they're gonna say. But the easiest way, I never let my clients do anything that isn't backed in science. And I make that rule. You're not allowed to make a statement. You're not allowed to make a claim on anything unless you can show me the science of it. Because if somebody comes back to you, the risk is, it ruins your reputation, right? So I said, circular economy gives you opportunities instead of ruins your reputation, because you have science. And there's a whole science of actually measuring your inputs and outputs, and you could calculate your percent of circularity. I actually, if I can do a little, this Preston, this class wasn't available yet. I recorded, and it is this presentation that I gave today, but it's expanded on. We go way into the tools, and I add one more, which is the calculation of your circularity. So if you want to say 23 of my inputs are circular and 89% of my outputs are circular, we talk about how to calculate. There's actually a protocol on that. And this is a mini masterclass that talks about that I recorded, and it's from that presentation. But like I said, it's like 2.5 hours. If anybody's interested, there's also one on procurement, sustainability, and then they did some other ones too, like 3PL and supply chain. But both of these use that very systematic approach. The procurement one's actually from the Harvard professor who is my mentor in the systematic thinking. And so if anybody's interested, email me. I'll give you a coupon code for these. But it talks about it even more. Not that I was planning on plugging that, but I thought if anybody was interested, there is more to that, more to this presentation than just what we talked about today. If I have one tool that I would like you guys to think about going forward today, it would be drawing things out and looking for patterns. Even it doesn't even have to look like this. It could just be numbers in transportation. If you want to look at, some of that in your greenhouse gases, it would just be some form of drawing it out. And like I said, if you have a lot of SKUs or anything like that, you can make it groups. You can just do it, however it makes sense for you, so that you have a look at everything. It just helps you think and, put it on the wall and look at it for a few days and think about it. And then you might come up with an idea.
Just like to make a comment. Everyone on this webinar is probably very steeped in lean thinking, and some of this stuff really runs in parallel with Kaizens and et cetera. So
absolutely,
I think everybody would pick up on using all this quickly because they've been involved.
Exactly. It's as I said, none of this is new. It's all, they all come from the same granddad. When you're drawing out lean or, you're making your maps, it's all the same kind of thinking, that very system. which is why I like it, because like you said, if you are very lean and you're into that, you can draw yourself a different kind of map, put it on the wall and think about it for a few days, and you might be surprised, what comes to you, because you already are steeped a little bit in this thinking. What's critical for this that I don't find as much in lean is this. When I'm walking the floor and I'm finding the job specific, am I using that to create my KPIs and find my outputs, right? Because here is where your circularity is. Above it is where your work is and your KPIs. And I've read, as a matter of fact, speaking of lean, on my bookshelf right here. But yeah, so you do have that very system approach. And somebody asked me a question. I saw it, but I didn't finish reading it. Materials on lithium or materials used in automaking. Any materials as far as materials that you can read about? Yes, you'll be getting a copy. I have no problems with that. Definitely, I'll give you a copy of the slide deck. It's
on the lithium side, I'm kind of really into all that stuff, but actually lithium could be mined very passively without a lot of harm. We have a thermal electrical station out in the desert east of us in San Diego, and they're extracting hot water from the core of the earth to run the generators to run the power plant.
mm-hmm.
And also they plan on extracting lithium before they return the water. So there'd be no digging, no this, no that. And I'm sure that eventually someone's going to do a study on all of that. But one of the key executives with Tesla went off and created a new company, and they're in Nevada, where they're going to do the recycling of the lithium batteries. Almost everything has value. They just grind it up and chemically separate it, and they're all over again. So there's a point in time where I don't know where that would be. It's almost like thinking about peak oil. When does peak oil really occur where there is no more, right? And we don't have any more to use. And it's going to go downhill from there. There's a point where we'll reach so much supply from recycled batteries that we don't need to go do mining any longer. So
Exactly.
That's a
yeah,
whole,
and that's the hope, right?
yeah, that's the hope. But that's you have to pay the piper somehow to get all this good stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of what you're going to do in the beginning is just very basic. Most companies start with packaging. They start with, the lowest hanging fruit that they can find, but it just keeps building and building and building and building, right? So in the very beginning, what you're doing is really basic. And like I said, maybe packaging is not the thing. Maybe it's saving water. Maybe it's saving energy. Maybe it's looking for hazardous substances, because that also is a key thing of circularity, because as I said, it makes it harder to deal with the material. And plus you have hazardous waste, right? So you want to, anything that needs to come out. So when you're looking at one end of your process, you always want to know, what is it connected to? So the waste is connected to something. It came from somewhere. So when you see the waste, I recently was working with a hospital, and they said, how do we make our people put the waste in the right bins? I said, don't have waste in the first place. So where is this waste even coming from that you're worried about they're not putting it in the right bins? And it was in an area. And I said, well, the first key is get rid of what you can from the beginning, and then you can, do some behavior modifications on how that is. But do you need all that waste in the first place? Like, where's it coming from? And they're like, well, we don't know. We just don't want it to be in the wrong bin.
Right,
like,
right.
well, you should know where it's coming from. Like, that's the key. Well, so that's what it is thinking.
Yeah, I think in healthcare, the problem is that they get to charge everything on an itemized list at an exaggerated price, so they don't mind using something.
They don't know where their waste is. They have no idea where it comes from.
Yeah, and that should be a national goal to actually help healthcare tighten up and reduce costs.
Yeah.
I think it's been great. I know Nick, or let me see, Nick, Jim, anybody have comments? Anna, Fernando?
I had one question.
Yes, sir.
Denise, thank you for your presentation. That was very informative. I'm glad you mentioned kind of the recyclability of products, because I think I've seen that as a trend kind of increasing recently. Like at the end of the product use, companies are marketing that their products are more recyclable than they've ever been before. But I mean, given our recycling system and how well it works, that's not a great solution. So do you see that as like,
23% of plastic is typically recycled.
yeah,
That can be. There's a lot of behavior modification that needs to happen. But again, this may sound silly, but I can make a whole lot more inroads if I work with the manufacturer and get rid of it in the first place than I can if I'm working with one manufacturer or 1 million customers. Whose behavior is it easier to modify, right?
Yeah.
And so, yes, but recycling, because again, you have to recycle it and you have to take it to the bin. I'll use Amazon as an example. I have a good friend who's one of the chief scientists at Amazon, and I got something in the mail, and I said to him, I looked at the package and it said, you have to go to this website to find out if it's recyclable. And so you have to scan the QR code and then it'll tell you if it's recyclable. And then it says, okay, you can't put it in a bin like the blue bin or the whatever. You have to take it to drop off locations.
Right.
And so I instantly text him and was like, what is this? Like, not only are you making it difficult for me to recycle, you really think I'm going to take this one package on down to the Whole Foods and recycle it? And I forget it and they piled up. And like, what are you thinking? You're telling me this is recyclable, but there's all these hurdles. Make it something else, either recyclable in my bin or make it out of something that's biodegradable or something, but don't make these hurdles. So you're right, like the hurdles are
Right. That's bad lawmaking because they pass laws and then they don't put enforcement in place. And they don't this is all really good stuff. Actually, I'm a bit amazed. As there are many industries in which refurbishing products is a given. If you're in automotive and you want a transmission, you can buy the equivalent of a brand new transmission that actually has been not refurbished, but totally rebuilt, and they just have the case and everything else, but everything else is new. Then they have another category. So recycling products and rebuilding them, was it MRO? MRO is just maintenance and repair and overhaul. It's been out there a long time, so it shouldn't be difficult to kind of roll that out from a conceptual standpoint and say, here's an example. The transmission that you may need in your car 10 years from now, it may cost $5,000, but you can get a completely rebuilt one now for $2,000. So, having examples to put up,
yeah. So that kind of thinking is called like, cradle to cradle, and that's actually been around for a long time. I remember in the early 2000s, Herman Miller made a chair, their fancy office chairs. And the whole point of this chair was that it could be completely disassembled and you could replace parts and, anything like that. And it just never caught on. Like nobody ever said, I want that chair. But it was completely designed for that. But at the same time, then you'll have the other things. So this chair is designed for, but it follows for, maintenance and all that. But it follows the typical supply chain of Herman Miller, which is not super sustainable.
Right.
So, I mean, they make stuff in China, they bring it to the US, they assemble it,
Right. Or you have some of the German car makers that make engine parts in plastic that break down at 30,000 miles and you have to overhaul the old engine. So a lot of it's just manufacturing engineering, industrial engineering, design engineering.
Correct. But I think we all need to start with just cleaning our own house first, right? If you are super efficient in what you do, it makes it easier to profess to your retailers and your customers and, or whoever,
Right.
that. Hi, Anna. Anna has a question.
Hello, thank you so much for this. Thank you so much for this presentation. And I found it so digestible and easy to implement in the workplace because you broke it down procedurally and you gave us a little bit of systems thinking, which was fascinating because I'm obsessed with that too right now. It helps us solve very complex problems, which is what this is. What I found interesting about this is how easy this would be to implement using your framework. And I have a question for you.
Sure.
How do you build that upstream relationship with, the packaging supplier, like somebody who is giving you too much packaging, but how do you kind of push it upwards, get them to be responsible for it? How do you engage the relationship?
That's a great question. So I worked with a supply chain company maybe about a year ago now, and we decided that they wanted to go after a couple of key things, and packaging was one of them. And so what we did is we made a very, very simple survey, and we sent it out to all their suppliers or their key suppliers, their top 20% that does 80% of the work. And we didn't make it a pass fail. We just said, hey, we're looking to see how you're doing this. And then got some of those back, or at least the key ones that they wanted to engage. And then started the conversation. Hey, I see that you don't really know much about, sustainable packaging or, limiting your packaging. Would you be open to having a conversation with us? Because we're finding that we're throwing a lot of this away and you're paying for it, essentially. This is your money that we're throwing away. And so through that, they started developing relationships, but they literally started with a very simple form. And they were just trying to gauge the level of, where their suppliers were, because they didn't know. And their suppliers were very global and literally every corner of the globe. And so they kind of said, well, I think we have A to Z here. And then they kind of ranked them on basis of green hearts. So you could be a 4-heart green heart supplier, or a 3 green heart supplier, or 2 green heart supplier. And they set certain parameters so that they would know who to engage with and where you were just by looking at them in your system. Well, if you're a 3 green heart supplier, I know that you've got some level of knowledge and you're doing something. So that was kind of how they did it. They baby stepped it. They didn't send them like a 20-question questionnaire. I think it was like 6 questions. It was really just wanted to start finding out what people were doing and then building from there based on what they got.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good step to begin and kind of build that trust before they move forward.
And they just kind of said, hey, we're looking at our practices and we're looking around our warehouse. We got all this waste. So we're just asking because we want to see who knows what, or whatever. And it was we were so careful not to make it like you're doing something bad or, something like that. And they got great response and it just started opening up the conversations for them.
Thank you. That's super helpful. I'm going to see what I can do on my side.
Yeah, but it was just basic emails and things like that.
It's maybe this related to that. I don't think you should take it for granted that your supply base is ignorant. A person shouldn't do that. I had occasion where I wrote an article I was approached by the Pallet Association, the Wooden Pallet Association. I said, gee, why would I even write an article for them, right? The Wood Pallet Association. And I start to think about the nobleness of the wood pallet and it's moving products everywhere in the world for decades and 100 years and everything else. And then I got sent the article and they put it in their magazine and it came back. And there was a lot of advertisements, but all the articles dealt on sustainability. I was shocked. Not only mine, which was GHG emissions, but it was on heat stress on people from climate warming. It was sustainable logging. And there was one other plus mine. So in this one little quarterly magazine, and what I, up until they approached me, I thought as an obscure organization, they literally had their magazine filled with things dealing with sustainability to their members. So I think we shouldn't always think that people don't know, be prepared to approach them with that, but or shift into that mode. But there's a lot of concern out there that is just hidden from view. A lot of organizations and industries are concerned. So
Anna, also, that course that I showed you, so I learned system thinking from Dr. Pajasic, and he actually teaches the sustainable procurement one in that course with it. And it also has some very systems thinking insert kind of stuff too. So you might find that really helpful if you like that kind of thinking and it works. It sounds like it would work for what you do.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear more perspectives on it and the thinkers that have done the thinking for us. So thank you.